Now here are the pathways. Not that many of you have to know this, but I'm going to tell you why sugar is horribly bad. First, it stresses the organ. It actually makes the organ not work well. It starts to fail the organ. What organ do you think it fails the most? Pancreas, second, heart. Third, kidney. Fourth, liver. Fifth, gallbladder. So it actually impairs the function of these vital organs. They have the word vital ahead of them because if they don't work, you're dead. That's why they're called vital organs. When they stop working, then the body doesn't know what to do, and it allows to spill into the body something called candida. Now, candida was not a disease until several decades ago. This is an omnipresent fungi that grows everywhere in the world. Of course, a humid climate would have more than an arid climate, but even in the arid climates we have it. Everyone's immune system was pretty much strong enough to withstand it. It would not come in. But as we started to overwork and not sleep enough and drink tap water and wear polyester clothes and eat garbage, we started to have the immune system weaken, and then this disease, as other diseases, come in. There's not many different categories of disease. There's one problem with disease, a weak immune system. How do you prevent a disease? Strengthen the immune system. What helps you to reverse a disease? Strengthen the immune system. It's very, very single-minded, but it's factual, by the way. Cancer cells have 15 times more insulin receptors than normal cells. So now what you're doing is you're putting in 15 times more possibilities of receiving sugar than with a normal cell, another type of cell other than cancer cells. So the outer layer of the cell starts to degrade. The immune system can no longer eliminate. So it actually is like, you remember candy apples? So candy apple coats, picture the apple as being the cell. It completely coats the apple. So nothing can get in, nothing can come out of there. Systemic candida becomes a fungi, and this helps tumors to grow because cancers are anaerobic, meaning they don't like oxygen. And you look at the work that has been done by many institutions currently, some I've mentioned during this conference, and all of them agree with Warburg's work back from the early part of the 20th century, that fermented sugars reduce oxygen, reduction of oxygen, 1/3 of oxygen reduced in a 48-hour period dramatically increases the potentiality for all forms of cancer. And sugar is the number one cause of this. And what is the type of sugar that can cause it more than anything else? Starts with an F. Fruit. Because it acts more like what? A safe alternative. Here's the answer. Stevia. Thank God stevia is literally 300 times sweeter than sugar. Now that's not an exaggeration. That's a data-based fact. So if you took a gram of fruit sugar and a gram of stevia, it's 300 times sweeter. The problem that people have with stevia, they overuse it and it tastes horrible. I mean, you put 2 drops of a liquid, a proper form of liquid stevia, into a liter or a quart of pure water with a lemon in it, it's going to taste like you put 8 tablespoons of sugar in there. So just use small amounts. And this is the bridge I wish I had. Now, when I gave up meat, I did it in one day as much as I loved meat. I wasn't born a vegan. I was born an idiot. And all I can tell you is that I loved meat, and I loved the worst meat, and salami, bologna, pastrami. I would put it in extra oil and fat on top of it, But one day I gave it up. Dairy took me 3 years because the moral issue, as you heard my good friend here, Dr. Will, talk the last 2 days. Isn't he great? His heartfelt greatness. Yeah. So morally, I say, well, I'm not killing it, I'm just milking it. Even though I'm not milking it, I'm milking it. So 3 years it took me to give up dairy food. But the real killer was 3 decades for sugar. Again, going back to where we began, this is the most addictive substance that humans have ever touched in their life. You want stevia. I wish I had stevia. It may have gone from 3 decades to 29 years. But 3 decades, hopefully to 1 decade or 5 years, because if I thought I was getting sugar, it's like methadone for heroin addicts, right? I probably would have been okay. I wouldn't have needed the sugar. I wouldn't have needed the dope if I thought I was getting the sugar. So this is the one that you need. The other thing you need is protein. What we do know in nutritional science and biochemistry is what corrects blood sugar concerns and addictions. Overeating, even if you're not addicted to sugar, you're addicted to pasta, you're addicted to bread, you're addicted to potatoes, they're all sugar. They just take 30 minutes to turn into sugar. So you're a closet case sugar addict. I don't eat any processed sugar. Then I look at the bowl of spaghetti. It's enough for 82 people. 30 minutes later, you might as well have taken a cup of sugar and doused it, just eaten it. And so, bottom line is proteins regulate. The Hippocrates living food diet is the highest absorbable protein diet on the planet Earth. Sprouts, algae. Carry these little algae in your pocket. I wish I had done this. I didn't know about this thing. And every time you want a candy bar or an agave syrup or a soda or God knows where you are in this process, take 2, 3, 4, the bigger 4 or 5. These little tiny pills, pop them in 10, 15 minutes, you start to regulate sugar because the protein actually magnetizes it and holds it together, taking it out of the bloodstream. It also has essential fats in it with the algae. And algae, by the way, significantly is the highest level of protein of any food known to man on Earth. In the case of the little algae, chlorella, it's 52% protein, blue-green algae, 54%. But to save money, by the way, for this purpose, just use a chlorella, because one doesn't work that much better than the other. Now, blood sugar conditions. We're not diminishing the importance of obesity, but our data suggest that there are additional factors that contribute to diabetic risk besides obesity and total calorie intake, and that sugar appears to play a prominent role. Stanford University. So now what they used to deny just a handful of years ago is in the hierarchy of research. Brave doctors saying this, because I'm sure, and I don't know this to be a fact, that Stanford, like many other of the Ivy League and large universities globally, are funded by food industries and pharmaceutical industries. So you have to have courage to get up and say what's really happening sometimes. So if you look at what Lustin says down here, most of us look at the Sir Bradford Hill examination associated with inferred causation. That means if you do something, what happens? Well, in this case, if you do something, you end up with diabetes. What is the thing that you're doing? Eating sugar. So what we do know is the number one cause of type 2 diabetes is generally fat. There are some exceptions, but generally fat. And even skinny people can have too much fat in their bloodstream. Sometimes when you literally see thin people, you assume they have no fat. They may have more fat than a plump person in their bloodstream. And when that fat gets in, it smothers a cell, just like the candy apple I've just spoken about. And even the little bit of processing of burning of the sugar that would go on is no longer possible. And so now all sugar, or the vast majority of sugar, remains in the bloodstream, causing a diabetic condition. Then you eat sugar on top of the sugar you have, and that's when the jig is up. That's when you're in big trouble. So University of California, San Francisco, they say, re-exposed and the disease gets worse again. So you take away the sugar, people get better. You give sugar, and people get worse. I've been watching this in my 4 decades of work with people. We see the quickest things happen are with blood sugar, with everyone. You see that immediately. Our medical team, of course, we do a lot of blood profiling, and one of the things we look at is glucose numbers. And within a matter of days, we're not talking about weeks, days. Just like up until recently, we used to think that it took years to get a fatty liver. Studies that were just conducted show it takes days to get a fatty liver. If you go completely bananas and eat overwhelming amounts of sugar, in a matter of 6 to 7 days, you can start to develop a fatty liver. Look at this poor little child. He was probably loved. Now, this is what addict parents do to children. If you're a sugar addict, and you are, by the way, there's one pledge I want all of us globally to make now, is let's put our hands up in the room and out there. I am a sugar addict. And my determination is to become a recovering sugar addict. Because I'm going to tell you, you're never not going to be a sugar addict once you're a sugar addict. Now, I've had the great privilege to not feed my children, my 4 children, sugar. And my children don't want sugar. If I gave them a choice between a very green-tasting sprout juice and a mango, they would take the sprout juice. To even get our children to eat fruit is a difficult thing sometimes. We may have overdone it. Since 1990, the World Health Organization has recommended that intake of free sugars should be less than 10%. Now, that's down from what we're doing. I mean, at one point, probably 50% of my diet was some form of sugar. How about you? So 10% is reasonable. People now expect to keep their teeth into old age. Given that the negative effects of sugar on teeth are lifelong, limiting sugar less than 5% of our calories would minimize the risk of dental cavities. Now, this is the Newcastle University out of England. The truth is that they don't want to be brave enough to say don't eat any form of sugar. And the worst sugar for the teeth is what? Does anyone know? And I'm going to put the word organic in. It doesn't mean it has to be organic, but organic dried fruit. He said the number one way to rot the teeth out of your head is organic dried fruit. Why? It's like God created that to rot your teeth. It sticks to your teeth. White sugar doesn't stick to your teeth. You have residual effect there, but you don't have it sticking to your teeth. And I don't care if it's organic or not. So if you are ever going to eat dried fruit, you better carry dental floss with you and water picks and immediately clean it out, because otherwise it starts within a matter of seconds eating the tooth. Now, how many of you know osteoporosis has an awful lot to do with sugar? Studies have shown that consuming excessive quantities of sugar, processed and refined sugars, or sucrose and high fructose corn syrup, cause a large urinary calcium excretion, both in healthy study subjects and in those who were prone to kidney stones. This is not surprising since sugar is a highly acidifying food. So all of you that talk about alkaline diets, and I'm going to get alkaline water, how about giving up sugar? Because, oh, well, wait a minute. It's much easier to drink, I have to drink water, and water doesn't have a taste, but you mean I have to give up sugar? Because it's one of the highest ways to get acidity in my body? And the answer is yes. Not maybe, not possibly. I want to make you acid, I give you sugar. Agave syrup, organic agave syrup, raw agave syrup. No such thing, by the way. There's no such thing as raw agave syrup. Just like the word natural is prostituted, the word raw is prostituted many times. If you don't have ethical companies like the ones we had here, they're probably lying to you. The reality is, it takes 180 degrees minimally to extract from the cacti the fruit sugar from that you and I call agave syrup. How many of you know heart disease? This is one of the most stunning ones. And I'm just cherry picking the best studies. I read 285 hours putting this book together so far. I'll probably read another double that before I finish the book this summer. Over the course of a 15-year study, this is a big study, the nurse study, I love this study, who took in 25% or more of their daily calories as sugar, were more than twice as likely to die from heart disease. Now somebody should hear that, because most of you take in a lot more than 25% of your diet by sugar. You have 2 times greater chance of dying from a heart attack or a stroke. Now, how come I'm telling you this? How come I'm telling you out there in the world? How come this isn't on the front page of news? Because let me tell you, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry to take care of a disease that's not really a disease called heart disease. And let me assure you that this is an empirically rich study. When you take 15 years and thousands of people, you don't come up with a number that's not accurate with this one. Now, when you have a study where you look at 4 people over 2 weeks, that's subjective, but not 15 years with thousands of people. And they took nurses who, by the way, are above the fray with health. Nurses are in the face of disease and death every single day and usually make much better lifestyle choices than the average person. Isn't that true? A lot of the nurses you know may not, but I'm going to tell you, On an average, they make much better choices than do other people, because they see what death looks like, they see what disease looks like, and they are above the fray. Now, nobody's ever done a study that I know of that say they're 10% or 20%, but even if they're 2%, and I would think it's more like 10 or 20% better living and lifestyles, look at what's happening to these people. And by the way, most of you are taking 30, 35%, 40%, as I joked with you, and I probably am right. Between the fruit I was eating and processed sugars, honeys, and all of that, I was probably 50% of my intake of food was sugar. Sugar-sweetened beverages such as sodas, energy drinks, and sport drinks. How many people die a year from energy drinks? Anyone know? Hundreds of deaths are documented from energy drinks every single year. We had a sweet boy come to us at Hippocrates with his entire family, his mother from Quebec, Canada, his two brothers and sisters. They were geniuses playing music. They actually gave us Baroque concerts when they were there. We cried, they were so beautiful. They were gifted in music, the whole family. And about a year and a half after the boy graduated, was a complete vegan and everything, he went out with his buddies who were drinking, and of course he didn't drink, but he took 5 energy drinks that night, and they found him the next morning dead. That was the first time I awoke to this, so I wrote an article about him in the Hippocrates magazine called Healing Our World. If you want to look at the last 35 years of those magazines, you can get on the Hippocrates website, Hippocrates Institute, and basically look that story up. It's touching. But then I basically looked at that. There are hundreds and hundreds of studies that show that children are dying from these things. And sports drinks, it's like sports bars. That's an oxymoron. Have you ever seen sport-like people in sports bars? A big fat guy is drinking in sports bar, watching guys run. You know, that's the way they get athletics. Oh, look at them run. Oh, look at Joe over there. You know, have another beer. Well, sports drinks. And when you run, you know, the big question I have from runners, they come to me, well, how am I going to do this? How am I going to run a marathon and a triathlon without sugar? Look at the work that was done by our colleague, Dr. Cooper. Brilliant man on exercise. Matter of fact, he legitimized exercise as a science, Dr. Kenneth Cooper. And a long time ago, about a quarter of a century ago, he did a study that blew our minds, all of us. He showed that Olympic athletes, gold medalists worldwide, were dying much younger and much sooner from major diseases than the rest of the general population. Now, if you had asked me 26 years ago, other than people who live in the Hippocrates way, who are the healthiest people, I would have said Olympic athletes. Wouldn't you have? And he knew nothing about nutrition. He was an exercise zealot, thank God. And some of his team members were doctors who had actually reversed cardiovascular disease that were a bit more interested in nutrition, and they went behind that and they realized that why these athletes were dying, because in their 30s and 40s and 50s they were still exercising 3 and 4 and 5 hours a day, like they were 18 years old still, but they were malnourished. And so when you're eating candy bars and not getting micronutrients, and not getting essential fatty acids, and not getting adequate proteins to let the body rebuild again, because you're eating animal fats that are not adequate proteins for people, you literally end up with free radical damage. And it's free radical damage, and the sugar creates more of that than anything else. That's why it prematurely ages you, even fruit. It kills cells and creates more free radical damage. And Cooper published that study, and we all woke up. If you want to be an athlete, you have better eat correctly. Have you ever noticed, and I'm not going to bash runners, but they all look like hell. I put my foot in my mouth recently. I saw a man I thought was my age, in their 60s. And I said, you must be my age. The boy was 49 years old. That's what most runners look like. They're pale, their hair's going gray too soon. They're getting wrinkles way above the rest of the time because they're pounding constantly and malnourished. Now he's on raw food. Thank God a yoga instructor or somebody put him on raw food. But I hope it's not the typical raw food diet. The superfood diet, as I call it. That's not raw food. That's recreational food. The real superfoods come from the sun. And every drop of life comes from the sun, and the green leafy plant is the superfood. Everything comes way after that one. Way after that one. So if you want superfoods, not the ones that taste best.